This morning, U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. He doesn't hold news conferences with local reporters, not the way he used to. The last with the ambassador from Finland was in October, his spokesman confirmed. But he sat down with a couple of us this week, ready to discuss his new committee chairmanship, the powerful Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. We asked him about that, about his political future, and what is possible in a divided Congress the next 2 years. What is on your agenda?
Well, when you're dealing with health, education, labor, and pensions, you're dealing with a whole lot that impacts the people of Vermont and the whole country. In terms of health, I want to aggressively get into the issue of why we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and see what we can do to lower prescription drug costs in this country. To me, it is beyond comprehension that we pay in some cases 10 times more than Canadians pay for the same exact drug. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical industry, year after year, makes tens of billions of dollars in profits. So lowering the cost of prescription drugs is very high up on my agenda. In America today, in Vermont, we don't have enough doctors. We have a major nursing crisis. We don't have enough dentists. We don't have enough mental health practitioners. How do we increase the healthcare workforce? And what are the problems there is a big issue for me. In terms of labor, nationally, not in Vermont, but nationally, minimum wage is $7.25 an hour.
Yeah.
Got to raise the minimum wage to, in fact, a living wage. In terms of education, I don't have to tell any working parent in Vermont, childcare system is in disarray. People can't afford childcare. Workers are making starvation wages. How do we create a childcare system that is worthy of our kids and meets the needs of their parents? So those are some of the issues that are on my.
When you ran for president, $15 an hour was part of your stump speech. Is that still the number? And
no,
will
it's
there be
too
a
low.
bill?
It's
Okay.
too low. I mean, the truth is, we got to get things passed. Then I got a Republican House, and many of those guys are not particularly sympathetic about raising the minimum wage at all. So we got to figure that one out. But we fought for $15 an hour 2 years ago before inflation hit us, and I think we've got to go higher than that now.
Last week, I saw a video online of you making a cameo with the president over the issue of student debt relief. One, I understand it's there's litigation, but why is it a good idea to relieve some forms of debt but not others?
Stuart, there are young people who come from working class families who have gone deeply, deeply into debt in order to get a college degree. And they're struggling right now. And I have talked to people like nurses and others who can't afford to get married, can't afford to have kids, can't afford a house because they're paying off outrageous levels of student debt. And these young people deserve a break. And I think the president is right. I would go further. But I think we have got to give them a chance to get going in the economy, and canceling the student debt is the right thing to do.
Folks, I know you're frustrated. I am as well.
And I am too. For millions of working and middle-class Americans who are under the burden of crushing loan debt, student debt relief would be life-changing.
Now, we're fighting like hell to get this done. We're in court next month, so keep the faith and spread the faith.
What was that video shoot like? I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, it was really funny. I kind of walked into it. I was in the White House to talk to the president about a lot of things, and we got this script. But the president has brought forth didn't go as far as I would want, but it was a significant step forward in lowering student debt, and I was happy to work with him.
On President Biden, what's your view about, do you support him in 2024?
It's too early. Well, the answer is if he runs, yes, I will.
Do you think that the committee assignments that you will have in this next Congress, there's been a great deal made of Senator Leahy's retirement. Senator Welch got some of the same committees that Leahy had, and now you're chairman of Health and Education. How does that combination work well for Vermont?
I think it works well for Vermont. Senator Leahy and I were never on the same committees, which is good. We spread it around. That's the case with Senator Welch as well. He's going to be on agriculture, which is important to Vermont among other committees. And I'm going to be handling health, and I'm on Veterans Committee, which is very important to me, Public Works, Energy. So I think we are going to be, between the two of us, addressing many or virtually all of the issues that impact Vermont.
The new Speaker of the House said over the weekend that Medicare and Social Security are off the table with respect to negotiations with the White House over the debt ceiling. I mean, that must be good news to you.
Well, Trump told them that. You know, a few weeks ago, Trump said, don't cut Social Security and Medicare. They listened to Trump, and that's the thing. So it's a good thing, yes. But we are going to bring forth this week, actually, significant legislation on Social Security. And there are two parts to the problem. Number one, we have a solvency problem with Social Security. We want to expand the solvency issue, making sure that Social Security will be there for our kids and our grandchildren. And number two, you got a lot of lower income senior citizens who really cannot make it on $16,000, $18,000 a year. Just not enough. If you're a senior in Vermont, you got to heat your home and buy food and everything else. So we have introduced legislation, which will have a good number of co-sponsors, which says lift the cap. Right now, the problem with Social Security, you make $10 million a year, somebody makes $160,000 a year, you're both contributing the same amount into the fund. You lift that cap, start at $250,000. So 93% of the American people will not pay a nickel more in taxes. You do that, Social Security is solvent for the next 75 years, and we increase Social Security benefits for lower income seniors, and that's what we've got to do.
What should the president, though, how do you negotiate with this new majority in the House over the debt limit?
I think what you do, in a sense, we already won an important part of the discussion because it's clear. If the choice is raising taxes on the wealthy or cutting Social Security, my guess is 90% of the people will support us. And they're not stupid, they caught on, and as Trump, made his statement. So you take the case to the American people, and the American people support a progressive agenda. They don't want to cut Social Security. They don't want to cut Medicare. In fact, what they want to do is expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and eyeglasses.
You think it's time for a national conversation about gun reform?
Absolutely.
And
look,
gun
I mean,
violence?
we just one more instance of the horror of what we have seen for a number of years now. Tens of thousands of people die every single year because of gun violence. And we need, and here's the irony here, is that the overwhelming majority of the American people actually do believe in common sense gun safety legislation. What we're taking on is the NRA and very powerful gun lobbies who have an influence over certain members in Congress.
You don't sound hopeful.
We will see. I hope to God that we can do it.
Do you continue?
Maybe one more, Stuart, if you can.
Do you continue? Well, if there's just one more, I want to ask you about 2024. A lot of people in Vermont want to know what your plans might be.
It's too early. Yeah, but the answer is.
And it could be retirement. It could be running for
I
president
know,
again.
but
do you know?
What most people want to know is what Congress is going to do to improve their lives, and I think it is not a good thing. We just came through an election in November. And right now, 2 days later, people are asking, who's going to run? What are you going to do? So I think it's much too early. And I think my job right now is to focus, lowering the cost of prescription drug, raising the minimum wage, and making sure that we have affordable housing, protecting Social Security. That's the job that I'm elected to do. And that's what I want to do. At the appropriate time, I will make political decisions.
So in the meantime, how hopeful are you that there can be some progress? That you have a divided Congress now. What does that mean for the next 2 years?
I am not, I tell you, on a lot of issues, we're not divided. Whether you're a conservative Republican or a progressive, you can't afford the cost of prescription drugs. You want to lower the cost of prescription drugs. You want to expand health care. You want to make sure that working families are able to afford child care. You want to protect Social Security. There is a lot more agreement among the American people, I think, than we perceive. And we're going to try to bring people together to pass legislation which protects the middle class and working families.
Senator, thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
Senator Bernie Sanders.